In Elden Ring, I recently found some confirmation of my King's Blood theory from the world of Ice and Fire. When we were down to Pentos, we moored beside a trader called the Slow-Eyed Maid, and I got to drinking with her captain steward. He told me a pretty tale about some slip of a girl who come aboard in Karth to try to book passage back to Westeros for her and 3 dragons. Silver hair she had, and purple eyes. I took her to the captain my own self, this steward swore to me. Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth, with your host, the Green Bard. In this video I ask, can Elden Ring inform us about A Song of Ice and Fire? Many of you know that George R.R. Martin, the writer of the book series A Song of Ice and Fire, upon which is based the popular TV show on HBO, Game of Thrones, contributed to the recent very successful fantasy game Elden Ring by From Software. Let's look a little more into what his contributions actually were. We learned this from George R. R. Martin in his own words during an interview with Stephen Colbert. They wanted the world building, which I've been doing for quite a while and I like doing it. And later he gives some more detail. What they wanted me to write was what happened 5,000 years before that totally screwed up the world so that the present was really messed up. So I went back and wrote, a history of what happened 5,000 years before the current game, and who all the characters were, and who was killing each other, and the powers they had. The powers they had, eh? Then, per Den of Geek. Since Martin produced the game's backstory and lore, he essentially wrote key parts of a design document, a crucial part of game development that is written during the pre-production and includes story, characters, art, and game mechanics. And per The Gamer, it appears he didn't just write a vague overview of events, but a detailed history of the realm, crafting the relationships and powers that all the Elden Ring players are so keen to uncover now, like the hidden clues about Selin, Ranni, and the Carrion bloodline. As it happens, my King's Blood theory from A Song of Ice and Fire is also about bloodlines. Magical bloodlines. I think George is probably using similar patterns in both worlds. In A Song of Ice and Fire, there are several important bloodlines, each with a special hue to their eyes. My theory is that several of the great houses in that plot line have magical genes from ancient ancestors who were leaders of the mythical Great Empire of the Dawn, all descendants of the first emperor, the God on Earth. The Targaryens, and other houses with violet eyes, such as the Danes, can trace their lineage to the Amethyst Empress. The Starks, main protagonists in the series, having gray eyes, can probably trace their lineage to the Opal Emperor. The Martells, with black eyes, descendants of the Rhoynish Nymeria, are probably related to the Onyx Emperor. The Baratheons, Tullys, and other families in the Stormlands and Riverlands, with blue eyes, can trace their heritage to fair Eleni, said to be a child of gods, and probably a relation of the Tourmaline Emperor. The Lannisters, and many other families in the west and south, can trace their lineage to Garth Greenhand, who is related to the Jade Emperor. And finally, House Greyjoy and probably House Hightower, with grey eyes, can trace their lineage to the Grey King, a relation of the Pearl Emperor. It occurs to me that George R. R. Martin may have used this same concept in writing the backstory for Elden Ring. I was first clued into the idea by the plotline of the NPC character Roderika. After meeting Roderika, she will appear in a sort of home base called Round Table Hold. An obvious Arthurian reference. You'll find that George R. R. Martin also loves to scatter these around his world building. Once Roderika is at the Round Table, you interact with another NPC, Smithing Master Hugh, who makes the following observation about Roderika. The girl you brought here, she's crestfallen and can scarcely swing a blade, but she has a gift for spirit tuning. I saw another one like her, long ago. Their eyes share the same hue. And later, after you speak to Roderika again, Hugh tells us this. I spoke with the girl. She has a gift for spirit tuning, so I told her everything I know. I'm indebted to a spirit tuner I met long ago. It was all I could do to honor her. I'm sorry I doubted you. Spirit tuning it appears, is a magic related to the ability to summon spirits to protect you in your travels, especially when assailed by strong enemies. Roderika's talent seems to be to teach you how to strengthen the summoned spirits. This is certainly a magical ability, and as I said before, magical abilities are genetic in George R. R. Martin's world. The closest analog I can think of in A Song of Ice and Fire is skin changing. My speculation is that the spirit tuner to whom smithing master Hugh is indebted is, on account of their matching eye color, almost certainly an ancestor of Roderika. To me, this is an obvious conclusion from the dialogue, which is almost supporting my own theory about the heritage of King's blood in A Song of Ice and Fire. Who is that spirit tuner of yore? Well, I'm not certain we have enough information to find that out, but I would like to investigate the magical bloodlines of the lands between to see what we can glean. There seem to be at least 4 important eye colors or types in the game, magically. 1. The golden eyes of Queen Marika and several of her relations, including the golden lineage of descendants of Godwyn the Golden. 2. The blue eyes of Ranni, and perhaps the rest of the Carrion royal family. 3. The Gloam-Eyed Queen, probably Melina, who presumably had at least one dusk, indigo, or violet eye. 4. The faded eyes of some tarnished, including the Lu family, descendants of Godfrey, and his army, then possibly Roderika and several others. Unfortunately, the tarnished, having lost the guidance of grace, have dull eyes in-game for most scenes, so it's hard to interpret the lore around this. I've seen some really good fan art of Roderika that show her having bright green eyes, like this piece here, but the best canon image from the game, shown here, is a little bit more difficult to interpret. I assume them to also be green eyes, matching her emerald. Only Ranni has similar eyes in-game, although I call hers more blue than green, and Roderika's more green than blue. YouTuber AGT Jake suggests that perhaps Ranni's mentor, who he names Renna, might be that spirit tuner whom Hugh had met long ago. He reasons that Ranni may have falsely played on Hugh's debt to Renna, and had him fashion the god-killing weapons from the Night of the Black Knives. The fact that Ranni impersonates her again in-game may be good support for the idea. This would also be a good reason for him to be imprisoned by Marika and used for her own ends, so that he can make amends. So I think I've come to a satisfactory conclusion here. Roderika is probably a descendant of Ranni or her mentor, Renna. And in this story, just like George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, she carries that magical bloodline into the current story. Now I want to talk about one other parallel in Elden Ring to A Song of Ice and Fire. In that series, there is a ship called the Slow-Eyed Maid, and also a mysterious character, Taina Merryweather, who is called a Slow-Eyed Beauty. The Oxford definition of slow-eyed is having attractive, dark, typically almond-shaped eyes. This is most often used for women with dark brown eyes. However, Martin is using a double meaning here, because sloe, or blackthorn, is actually a bluish-black or even purple fruit, like blueberries. So in the end, he may be tricking the reader into seeing brown eyes, whereas the character may actually have violet eyes. This is important because that is the eye color of the most important character in the series, Daenerys Targaryen, Mother of Dragons. Fun fact, Daenerys even encounters this ship in the second book of the series, A Clash of Kings. That brings to mind an Elden Ring character, the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Gloam is the color of twilight, which some might consider indigo or violet, perhaps a spot-on match to eyes the color of slow, magical eyes for Martin. Indeed, this character is an Empyrean demigod who was responsible for wielding destined death, probably even the guardian of the Rune of Death. She was killed long in the past, at Queen Marika's behest, to take control of the Rune of Death, seemingly to cement her own immortality. As I mentioned earlier, in one of the endings it becomes clear that Melina, your spirit guide throughout much of the story, is a remnant, or perhaps all that's left of the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Now, throughout the game, Melina's left eye is closed, or missing, and her right eye is golden, from the grace of the greater will. Outer gods who control the entire realm through the Elden Ring. Something unnatural. However, in a cutscene in this particular ending, an ending where the ring and the greater will have been destroyed, we see Melina with a faded right eye and a dark indigo or violet gloam eye. I am pretty sure that the Gloam-Eyed Queen from George R.R. Martin's backside, from George R.R. Martin's backstory is definitely the same character, with one crucial difference. She would have two good eyes, one golden and one dark violet gloam eye. This has a really good tie to another theory in A Song of Ice and Fire. Martin also has several characters who have two different colored eyes. The symbolism around one main character who has that trait, Tyrion Lannister, is that he's a sphinx, a gargoyle, a bit of this and a bit of that. What I'm getting at is that Tyrion has two fathers and one mother. In science, that is called heteropaternal superfecundation. He is a chimera, the fusing of two embryos. One embryo and his green eye are from his mother, Joanna, fertilized by Tywin, who most believe to be his father. And the other embryo and his black eye come from the coupling of Joanna and Aerys, the Mad King. King Aerys has purple eyes, thus the black, which might be described as gloam. Now we know that George R.R. Martin is thinking about this type of thing because he has a historical Targaryen bastard character, Maelys the Monstrous, who was also a twin fused in utero, but later in development, whereby Maelys' twin's head is sticking out of his neck. And in Elden Ring, he pays service to this same concept with the twinned armor set, where a smaller twin's head, arms, and torso are sticking out of the breastplate of that armor. Another historical character, Alyssa Targaryen, exhibits similar traits, and it is theorized that she is the daughter of King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne, but perhaps also Queen Alysanne and Lord Alaric Stark. Heteropaternal superfecundation may also be what's happening in Elden Ring for the Gloam-Eyed Queen / Melina as well. She was born of the Rune of Death and the Elden Ring, her two fathers, and Queen Marika likely as her mother, or perhaps the Erd Tree itself as her mother. Either way, the colors match, one gloam eye for the Rune of Death, and one golden eye for the ring, Marika, or the Erd Tree. In the legend, if perhaps someone tore out the gloam eye in killing her, they were symbolically or literally stealing the Rune of Death in that act, or at least the part of it that was in her. The reason I mentioned this is that there is an item called the Beast Eye in Elden Ring, which is very reminiscent of Melina's missing gloam eye. This is of course reminiscent of the Stranger in Westeros, or the Many-Faced God in Brevos, and the Grim Reaper from the mythology of our own world. But there is one other A Song of Ice and Fire character that George R.R. Martin may be referencing, Euron Greyjoy. Now, in the HBO show, Euron was a kind of punchline, but in the books, he is one of the spookiest and most dangerous characters in the entire story. To the world, he wears an eye patch and presents only his smiling eye. But to his enemies, and when he is working magic, he shows his blood eye. Behind his smiling eye, he is charming, the life of the party, a king. Behind his blood eye, he is nothing less than a madman, but the intelligent, psychopathic, cold-blooded, murderous sort. A beast eye, indeed. By presenting a character with an eye that has the symbolism of twilight, a beast, and the Rune of Death, George R.R. Martin may be referencing those traits in Euron. And Euron is, of course, foreshadowed to be a catalyst for the coming long night, where dusk and winter will encompass an age. Thanks to my Song of Ice and Fire fans for sticking with this crossover video, and I hope it helps you to better understand my Kingsblood theory. And for the Elden Ring folks, I hope this helps you to better understand the lore of the Lands Between, and perhaps it even attracts you to A Song of Ice and Fire, and vice versa, of course, for my Song of Ice and Fire fans. Peace. Thanks to all the terrific artists whose work is featured on this video.
Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far. If you enjoyed this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.